Part 4. So, Joseph Smith's polygamy also included dishonesty in public sermons. Denials by Joseph Smith that he was practicing polygamy was exposed in the Navajo Expositor that exposed his polygamy, and which destruction of the printing press initiated the chain of events that led to Joseph's death. An illegal marriage to Fanny Alger, which was described by Oliver Cowdery as dirty, filthy, nasty affair in the Rough Rolling Stone. William McClellan reported a conversation he had with Emma Smith in 1847, which account is accepted by both LDS and non-LDS historians, describing how Emma discovered her husband's affair with Fanny Alger. One night, Emma, missed Joseph and Fanny Alger. She went to the barn and saw him and Fanny in the barn together alone. She looked through the crack and saw the whole transaction. 4 exclamation points. She told me this story too was verily true. LDS polygamy apologists further discuss Emma's further. Give me a second. LDS polygamy apologists further discuss Emma's disturbing discovery in the aftermath here. Joseph was practicing polygamy before the sealing authority was given. LDS historian Richard Bushman states that there is evidence that Joseph was a polygamist in 1835. Plural marriages are rooted in the notion of, quote, sealing for both time and eternity. The, quote, sealing power was not restored until April 3rd, 1836, when Elijah appeared to Joseph in the Kirtland Temple and conferred with the sealing keys upon him. So, Joseph's, quote, marriage to Fanny Alger in 1833 was illegal under both the laws of the land and under any authority of divine authority. It was adultery. Doctrine and Covenants very clearly states that the only purpose of polygamy was to, quote, multiply and replenish the earth and bear the souls of men. So why did Joseph marry women who were already married? These women were obviously not virgins, which also violated Doctrine and Covenants. Zena Huntington had been married 7.5 months and was about 6 months pregnant with her first husband's baby at the time that she married Joseph. Clearly, she didn't need any more help to, quote, bear the souls of men. How about the consent of the first wife, which received so much attention in Doctrine and Covenants 132? Emma was unaware of most of Joseph's plural marriages, at least until after the fact, which violated Doctrine and Covenants 132. The secrecy of the marriages and the private and public denials by Joseph Smith are not congruent with the honest behavior. Emma was not informed of most of these marriages until after the fact. The saints did not know what was going on behind the scenes, as polygamy did not become common knowledge until 1852, when Brigham Young revealed it in Utah. Joseph Smith did everything he could to keep the practice secret from the church and the public. In fact, Joseph's desire to keep this part of his life a secret is ultimately what contributed to his death when he ordered the destruction of the Navajo expositor, which publicly dared to expose his private behavior in June of 1844. This event initiated a chain of events that ultimately led to his death at Carnegie Jail. Consider the following denial made by Joseph Smith to the Latter-day Saints in Navajo in May 1844, a mere few weeks before his death. Joseph said, "What a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives when I can only find one. I am the same man and as innocent as I was 14 years ago, and I can prove them all perjurers." It is matter of historical fact that Joseph had secretly taken over 30 plural wives by May of 1844, and when he made the above denial that he was ever a polygamist. If you go to familysearch.org, an LDS-owned genealogy website, you can clearly see that Joseph Smith had many wives. Click to expand on Joseph's wives. The church's October 2014 Plural Marriage in Kirkland and Navajo essay acknowledged that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. The facts speak for themselves from 100% LDS sources that Joseph Smith was dishonest. The following 1835 edition of Doctrine and Covenants Revelation bans polygamy. In 1835, Doctrine and Covenants 104 verse 4. Inasmuch as this Church of Christ has been reproached with the crime of fornication and polygamy, we declare that we believe that one man should have 1 wife and 1 woman, but 1 husband, except the case in death where either is at liberty to marry again. In 1835, same year, Doctrine and Covenants 13 verse 7. Thou shalt love thy wife with all thy heart, and shalt cleave unto her, and none else. 1835, Doctrine and Covenants 65 verse 3. Wherefore it is lawful that he should have 1 wife, and they twain shall be 1 flesh, and all this that earth might answer the end of its creations. There's backtracking. Freaking. So Joseph Smith was already a polygamist when these revelations were introduced to the 1835 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants, and Joseph publicly taught that the doctrine of the church was monogamy. Nevertheless, Joseph continued to secretly marrying multiple women and girls as these revelations/scriptures remain in force. Oh, also just consent. Just because he married these girls at like 12, 13, whatever, and they were married in like age of consent, but also informed consent. Sorry, yeah. Okay, so in an attempt to influence and abate public rumors to his secret polygamy, Joseph asked 31 witnesses to sign an affidavit published in the LDS October 1st, 1842 Times and Seasons, stating that Joseph did not practice polygamy, pointing to the above-mentioned DC Doctrine and Covenants scriptures that we said above. These witnesses also claim the following: "We know of no other rule or system of marriage than the one published from the Book of Doctrine and Covenants," even though that was updated after the fact. So the problem with the affidavit is that it was signed by several people who were secret polygamists or who knew that Joseph was a polygamist at the time that they signed the affidavit. In fact, Ezra R. Snow, one of the signers of this affidavit, was Joseph Smith's plural wife. Joseph and Eliza had been married 3 months earlier on June 29th of 1842. 2 apostles and future wives, John Taylor and Wildrow Woodruff, were also aware of Joseph's polygamy behind the scenes when they signed the affidavit. Another signer, Bishop Whitney, had personally married his daughter Sarah Ann Whitney to Joseph as the plural wife a few months earlier on July 27th, 1842. Whitney's wife and Sarah's mother Elizabeth, also a signer, witnessed the ceremony. What does it say about Joseph Smith and his character to include his plural wife and associates who knew about his secret polygamy and polyandry to lie and perjure in a sworn public affidavit that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. What is it? Now does the fact that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and polyandry while denying and lying to Emma, the saints, and the world over the course of 10 plus years of his life prove that he was a false prophet and that the church is false? No, it doesn't. What it does prove, however, is that Joseph Smith's pattern of behavior or modus operandi for a period of at least 10 years of his adult life was to keep secrets, to be deceptive, and to be dishonest, both privately and publicly. It's when you take the snapshot of Joseph's character and start looking into the Book of Mormon, looking into the Book of Abraham, the Kinderhook plates, the Book of Mormon, the multiple first vision accounts, priesthood restoration, and so on, that you begin to see a very disturbing picture. Today, Warren Jeffs is more closely aligned to Joseph Smith's Mormonism than the modern LDS churches. And so, let me flip this for you. It's a graph between Joseph Smith and Warren Jeffs. The black is Joseph Smith, the blue is Warren Jeffs. Number of wives: Joseph 34, Warren Jeffs 78. Okay. And then this is kind of a screenshot of what the family was like. Joseph Smith, all his wives, and then grouped together in families or in mother-daughter pairs or in sister pairs, and then children. And then, yeah. Okay, so moving on. The next concerns, I guess, prophets. From a quote from President Wilford Woodruff from his history of his life and labors, quote, "The Lord will never permit me or any other man who stands as the president of the church to lead you astray. It is not the program. It is not in the mind of God. If I were to attempt that, the Lord would remove me out of my place." Another quote from Elder M. Russell Ballard from an October 2014 conference. "Keep in the eyes of the mission on the leaders of the church. We will not and cannot lead you, quote, astray." A quote from 2013 Race and the Priesthood essay on LDS.org. Quote, "Today, the church disavows the theories advanced in the past that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor or curse, or that it reflects unrighteous actions in premortal life." Damn. Good to know. Okay, so, President Brigham Young taught what is now known as Adam God theory. He taught that Adam is, quote, "our father and our God, and the only God with whom we have to do," end quote. Brigham not only taught this doctrine over the pulpit in conferences in 1852 and 1854, but he also introduced this doctrine as a lecture at the veil in the endowment ceremony of the temple. Brigham also published this doctrine in the Deseret News on June 18, 1873. Brigham also published Yep, just read that. So, quote, "How much unbelief exists in the minds of the Latter-day Saints in regard to one particular doctrine which I revealed to them, and which God revealed to me, namely that Adam is our father and God. I do not know, I do not inquire, I care nothing about it. Our father Adam helped to make this earth. It was expressly for him, and after it was made, he and his companions came here. He brought one of his wives with him, and she was called Eve, because she was the first woman on the earth. Our father Adam is the man who stands at the gate and holds the keys of the everlasting life and salvation to all his children who have or ever will come upon the earth. I have been found fault with by the ministers of religion, because I have said that they were ignorant. But I could not find any man on the earth who could tell me this, although this is one of the simplest things in the world, until I met and talked to Joseph Smith. Contrary to the teaching of Brigham Young, subsequent prophets and apostles have since renounced the Adam God theory as false doctrine. President Spencer W. Kimball renounced the Adam God theory in the October 1976 General Conference. Quote, we warn you against the dissemination of doctrines which are not according to the scriptures and are alleged to have been taught by some of the general authorities of past generations. Such, for instance, is the Adam God theory. We denounce that theory and hope that everyone will be cautioned against this and other kinds of false doctrine. Along with President Spencer W. Kimball's and similar statements from others, Elder Bruce R. McConaughey made the following statement: the devil keeps this hearsay, Adam and God theory, alive as a means of obtaining converts to cultism. It is contrary to the whole plan of salvation set forth in the scriptures. And anyone who has read the book of Moses and anyone who has received the temple endowment has no excuse whatsoever for being led astray by it. Those who are so ensnared reject the living prophet and close their eyes and ears to the apostles of the day. Ironically, Elder McCormick, June's 1980 condemnation asks you to trust him and President Kimball as today's living prophet. Furthermore, McConaughey is pointing to the endowment ceremony as a source of factual information. What about the saints of Brigham's day who were following their living prophet? And what about the endowment ceremony of the day where the God and Adam theory was taught at the veil? Yesterday's doctrine is today's false doctrine, and yesterday's prophet is today's heretic. 2. Blood atonement. Along with Adam and God, Brigham taught a doctrine known as blood atonement, where a person's blood had to be shed to atone for their sins, as it was beyond the atonement of Jesus Christ. There are sins that men commit for which they cannot receive forgiveness in this world, or in that which is to come. And if they had their eyes open to their true condition, they would be perfectly willing to have their blood spilt on the ground, that the smoke thereof might ascend to heaven as an offering for their sins, and the smoking incense would atone for their sins, whereas if such is not the case, they will stick to him and remain upon him in the spirit world. I know when you hear my brethren telling about cutting people off from the earth that you consider it a strong doctrine, but it is to save them, not to destroy them. And furthermore, I know that there are transgressors who, if they knew themselves and the only condition upon which they can obtain forgiveness, would beg of their brethren to shed their blood, that the smoke thereof might ascend to God as an offering to appease the wrath that is kindled against them, and that the law might have its course. I will say further, I have had men come to me and offer their lives to atone for their sins. It is true that the blood of the Son of God was shed for Jesus. It is true that the blood of the Son of God was shed for their sins through the fall, and those committed by men, yet men can commit sins which it can never remit. There are sins that can be atoned for by an offering upon an altar, as in ancient days, and there are sins that in the blood of lamb or calf or of turtle dove cannot remit, but they must be atoned for by the blood of a man. Update. The church now confirms in its Peace and Violence among 19th century Latter-day Saints essay that blood atonement was taught by the prophet Brigham Young. As with the Adam and God theory, the blood atonement doctrine was later declared false by subsequent prophets and apostles. Yesterday's doctrine is today's false doctrine. Yesterday's prophet is today's heretic. 3. Polygamy. It's late, but it's important. Brigham Young taught the doctrine that polygamy is required for exaltation. Quote, the only men who become gods, even the Son of God, are those who enter into polygamy. End quote. Several other prophets after Young, including Taylor, Woodruff, Snow, and Joseph F. Smith, gave similar teachings that in the new and everlasting covenant of plural marriage was doctrine and essential for exaltation. It's even in the scriptures, Doctrine and Covenants 132:4. For behold, I reveal unto you a new and everlasting covenant, and if ye abide not by that covenant, then ye are damned, for no one can reject this covenant and be permitted to enter into my glory. In a September 1998 Larry King live interview, President Hinckley was asked about polygamy. Larry King, quote, you condemn it, polygamy? Hinckley, I condemn it, yes, as a practice, because I think it is not doctrinal, end quote. Contrary to President Hinckley's statements, we still have Doctrine and Covenants 132 in our canonized scriptures. We're also still practicing plural marriages in temples by permitting men to be sealed to more than one woman, as long as only one is living. Apostles Elder Oaks, Elder Perry, and Elder Nelson are modern examples of LDS polygamists in that they're sealed to multiple women. Polygamy is doctrinal. Polygamy is doctrinal. I don't know. Polygamy is not. And then yesterday's doctrine is today's false doctrine. Yesterday's prophets are today's heretics. 4. Black bans. As you know, for close to 130 years, blacks were not only banned from holding the priesthood, but black individuals and black families were blocked from the saving ordinances of the temple. Every single prophet from Brigham Young all the way to Harold B. Lee kept this ban in place. Prophet, Seers, and Revelators of 2013 in the church's December 13 Race and the Priesthood essay disavowed the theories of yesterday's prophets, seers, and revelators for their theological, institutional, and doctrinal racist teachings and revelation. So, yesterday's racist doctrine and revelation is now today's, quote, disavowed theories. Additionally, the above-mentioned essay also withdraws that, quote, black sin is a sign of divine disfavor or curse, end quote, while ironically contradicting the Book of Mormon itself, where it says in 2 Nephi chapter 5 verses 21, quote, and he had caused the cursing to come upon them, yea, even a sore cursing, because of their iniquity. For behold, they had hardened their hearts against him, and they had become like unto a flint. Wherefore, as they were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, the Lord of God did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. End quote. Fucked up. So Joseph Smith permitted the priesthood to at least two black men. Elijah Abel was one of them, and Walker Lewis was another one. So Joseph Smith gives the priesthood to the blacks. Brigham Young bans blacks. Each and every single one of the 10 prophets from Brigham Young to Harold B. Lee supported what Spencer W. Kimball referred to as a, quote, possible error. Heavenly Father likes blacks enough to give them the priesthood under Joseph Smith, but he decides they're not okay when Brigham Young shows up. And he still doesn't think they're okay for the next 130 years and the next 9 prophets until President Kimball decides to get a revelation. The same God who, quote, denieth none that come unto me, black and white, bond and free, male and female, is the same God who denied blacks from the saving ordinances of the temple for 130 years. Yet, he apparently changed his mind again in 1978 about black people. Of course, the revelation God gives to the brethren in the Salt Lake Temple on June 1st, 1978 has nothing to do with the fact that the IRS was considering potentially revoking BYU's tax-exempt status. Stanford and other universities were boycotting BYU athletes. And we can't figure out why. And we can't figure out who's black and not in Brazil. Because the Sao Paulo temple dedicated opened a few months after the revelation, and that post-civil rights societal trends were against the church's racism. I think that Christ's One True Church would have led the civil rights movement, not been the last major church on the planet in 1978 to adopt it. How can we trust these, quote, prophets, seers, and revelators who have been so wrong about so many important things for so long while claiming to be receiving revelations directly from God? Yeah, so yesterday's doctrine is today's false doctrine, and yesterday's 10 prophets are today's heretics. Number 5, Mark Hoffman. In the early to mid 1980s, the church paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in expense and valuable antiquities to cash to Mark Huffman. Mark Huffman was a con man and a soon-to-be serial killer. And they used this money that we gave them to purchase and suppress bizarre and embarrassing documents into the church vaults that undermined and threatened the church's story of its origin. The documents were later proven to be forgeries. The lack of discernment by the brethren on such a grave threat to the church is troubling. Also, speeches by Elder Dallin H. Oaks and President Gordon B. Hinckley offered apologetic explanation for the troubling documents. The Salamander Letter and Joseph Smith the Third blessing that later ended up, unbeknownst to Elder Oaks and President Hinckley at the time of their unapologetic talks, being proven completely fake and forgeries. So the following is Elder Oaks' 1985 defense of the fake Salamander Letter, quote, which Oaks evidently thought was real and legitimate at the time. So I'm going to read it. He thinks that these documents given and protected by a con man, Mark Huffman, this is what he had to say because he thought they were real. Quote, another source of differences in the accounts of different witnesses is the different meanings that different persons attach to words. We have a vivid illustration of this in the recent media excitement about the word salamander in a letter Martin Harris is supposed to have sent to W. Phelps over 150 years ago. All of the sources of media stories on that subject apparently assume that the author of the letter used the word salamander in the modern sense of a, quote, tailed amphibian. One wonders why so many writers neglected to reveal to their readers that there is another meaning of salamander, which may have even been the primary meaning in this context in 1820. That meaning, which is listed second in the current edition of Webster's New World Dictionary, is a spirit supposed to live in fire. Another definition for salamander. So, modern and ancient literature contain many examples of this usage. A spirit that is able to live in fire is a good approximation of the description Joseph Smith gave of the angel Moroni, a personage in the midst of light, whose countess was, quote, truly like lightning, and whose overall appearance was glorious beyond description. As Joseph Smith later wrote, the first sight of his personage was as though the house was filled with consuming fire. Since the letter purports only to be Martin Harris's interpretation of what he had heard about Joseph's experience, the use of the words white salamander and old spirits seem understandable. In view of all of this, as the matter of intellectual evaluation, why all the excitement in the media and why all the apparent handwriting among those who profess friendship with or membership of the church. The media should make more complete disclosures, but Latter-day Saints readers should also be more sophisticated in their evaluation of what they read. So what just happened? Elder Oaks defended and rationalized it as completely fake and a made-up document that Mark Huffman created while telling, quote, Latter-day Saint readers to be more, quote, sophisticated in their evaluation of what they read. There was significant dishonesty by President Hinckley with his relationship with Hoffman, his meetings, in which documents that the church had and didn't have. Just hours following the bombings on the morning of October 15th, 1985, murderer Mark Hoffman met with Elder Dolan H. Oaks in the church office building. He just killed 2 people, and what does he do? He goes down to the church office building and meets with Dolan Oaks. I can't even imagine the rush, given Hoffman's frame of reference, Jesus Christ, that this would have been given to him. To be there standing in front of one of God's appointed apostles after murdering 2 people, and that this person doesn't hear any words from God, doesn't intuit a thing. For Hoffman, that must have been absolute. For Hoffman, must to be an absolute rush. He had pulled off the ultimate spoof against God. Elder Oaks had a serial murderer right in front of him in his office just hours after Hoffman killed 2 people. Oaks later admits to this meeting. So, what does this say about the discernment of the brethren when they can't discern a murderer and con man hell-bent on destroying Mormonism right under their noses? Ultimately, the church was forced to admit it, and in the first presidency vault documents, the McClellan collection that the church previously denied it had. The McClellan documents were critical for the investigation of the Hoffman murders. While these prophets, seers, and revelators were being duped and conned by Mark Hoffman's forgeries for over a 4-year period between 1981 and 1985, the Tanners, considered some of the biggest critics of the church, actually came out and said that the Salamander letter was a fake. Even when the Salamander letter was proved very useful in discrediting the church, the Tanners had better discernment than the Brethren did. While the Tanners publicly rejected the Salamander letter, the church continued buying fakes from Hoffman, and the Elder Oaks continued telling Latter-day Saints to be more sophisticated. I'm told that prophets are just men who are only prophets when acting as such. whatever that means. I'm told that, like all prophets, Brigham Young was a man of his time. For example, I was told that Brigham Young was acting as a man when he was taught that, quote, God revealed it to him, quote, that Adam is our father and God, and that, quote, only God with whom we have to do, end quote. Never mind that Brigham taught this over the pulpit in not one but two conferences, and never mind that he introduced this theology into the endowment ceremonies into the temples. Never mind that Brigham Young made it clear that he was speaking as a prophet. Quote, I have never yet preached a sermon and sent it out to the children of men that they may not call scripture, end quote. So why would I want my kids chanting follow the prophet with such a ridiculous and inconsistent 187-year track record? What credibility do the brethren have? Why would I want them to follow the prophet when a prophet is just a man of his time teaching his, quote, theories that will likely be disavowed by the future, quote, prophets, seers, and revelators? If his moral blueprint is not much better than of their Sunday school teachers, if historically speaking the doctrine he teaches today will likely be tomorrow's false doctrine, if Brigham Young was really a prophet, seer, and revelator, would it not be unreasonable to expect that God would give him a hint that racism is not okay, sexism is not okay, blood atonement is not okay, and God's name is not, quote, Adam? See you in the next one.